Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. Death would have been a kindness compared to the way he looked at me, with a hunger that could swallow empires, yet a fear so visceral it made his hands tremble. I was on my knees, chains biting into the raw skin of my wrists, the cold marble of the throne room floor seeping into my bones, while he, High Priest Valerius, the scourge of the north, the man who had burned my city to ash, stood mere inches away. His breath ghosted over my face, smelling of winter frost and expensive wine. He raised a hand, his long, pale fingers hovering over my cheek, trembling like a leaf in a gale. The air between us crackled, heavy with unsaid things and a terrifying, magnetic pull. I braced myself for the strike, for the pain, for the cruelty he was famous for. But then, his eyes, usually sharp as shards of ice, clouded with pure, unadulterated panic. He snatched his hand back as if I were made of white-hot iron, stumbling away from me, gasping for air. "Take him away," he choked out, turning his back to hide his unraveling composure. "Lock him in the Sapphire Tower. And let no one touch him. No one." The Sapphire Tower was less a prison and more a gilded cage designed to drive a man insane with its beauty. 3 weeks. I had been a captive of the theocracy for 3 weeks. I was General Kalen Thorne, the Lion of the Resistance, a man who had spent the last decade sleeping in mud and drinking rainwater, fighting against the tyranny of the Silver Temple. Now, I slept on sheets of silk that cost more than a village's annual harvest, surrounded by walls of blue glass that offered a panoramic view of the capital city I had failed to conquer. My capture had been humiliating. A betrayal from within my own ranks had led Valerius's elite paladins straight to my command tent. I expected execution. Public beheading was the standard protocol for rebel generals. Instead, I was washed, clothed in velvet, and placed in the highest tower of the High Priest's private palace. Whatever game Valerius was playing, I was losing. The door to my chambers clicked open. I didn't turn from the window. I knew who it was by the change in air pressure, the sudden drop in temperature, the scent of ozone and crushed lilies. "You haven't eaten, Kalen." His voice was smooth, a baritone that vibrated in the chest. I turned slowly. Valerius stood there, resplendent in his ceremonial robes of white and silver, his long platinum hair cascading down his back like a waterfall of moonlight. He was beautiful in the way a storm is beautiful, destructive, distant, and awe-inspiring. "I don't have an appetite for poison," I rasped. My voice was rough from disuse. Valerius sighed, a small, elegant sound. He motioned with a hand, and the tray of food floating beside him via telekinesis set itself gently on the table. He never carried anything himself. He never touched anything if he could help it. "If I wanted you dead, General, I would have stopped your heart on the battlefield," he said, stepping closer. He stopped exactly 3 feet away. It was always 3 feet. The invisible barrier. "Then why am I here?" I challenged, stepping forward. He stepped back immediately, matching my pace. His eyes, a piercing violet, widened slightly. "Because you are valuable," he said, though the words sounded rehearsed. "Valuable?" I laughed, a bitter, barking sound. "To whom?" "The Resistance thinks I'm dead. You have no leverage." "You are valuable to me," Valerius whispered. The admission hung in the air, heavy and strange. I narrowed my eyes. The rumors about the High Priest were legendary. They said he was a vessel of the goddess, that his blood was liquid manna. They also said he was a sadist who disdained the touch of mortals because we were beneath him. The White Death, they called him. "If I'm so valuable," I said, deciding to test the boundaries of my cage, "then why do you look at me like I'm a leper?" I took another step. Valerius flinched. It was a minute reaction, a tightening of the jaw, a flare of the nostrils, but for a man who commanded armies with a flick of his wrist, it was telling. "Do not tempt my patience, Kalen," he warned, his voice dropping an octave. "It's not patience," I said, pushing further. I was a soldier. I knew how to find a weak point in armor. This was his. It's fear. The great High Priest Valerius. Afraid of a prisoner in magical suppression cuffs. I lunged. It was a reckless, stupid move. The cuffs around my wrists flared with blue light, sending a shock of pain up my arms, but I ignored it. I closed the distance, reaching out to grab the front of his pristine robes. I expected him to blast me backward with magic. I expected him to break my arm. Instead, Valerius let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. He scrambled backward, losing his footing on the polished floor. He fell hard, his elbows cracking against the stone, scrambling away from me like a cornered animal. "Stay back," he screamed. The composure was gone. The mask shattered. "Do not touch me. You fool, stay back." I froze. The terror in his eyes wasn't for himself. It was the look a parent gives a child reaching for a fire. He was hyperventilating, pressing his back against the door, his chest heaving beneath the heavy layers of silk. "You have no idea," he wheezed, his eyes squeezed shut. "You have no idea what you are doing." "Then tell me," I demanded, though my voice had lost its edge. Seeing the most powerful man in the world reduced to a trembling mess on the floor had sobered me. "Tell me why you keep me here, why you watch me sleep, why you bring me food yourself, but act like my skin is acid." Valerius opened his eyes. They were wet. "Because," he whispered, "I am not just a priest, Kalen. I am a vessel, and vessels are not meant to be touched." He stood up, regaining his dignity with shaky movements, and fled the room before I could ask another question. The lock clicked, sealing me in with the silence and a mystery that was beginning to eclipse the war itself. Days turned into weeks. The dynamic shifted. I was no longer just a prisoner. I was a puzzle solver, and Valerius was the enigma. I began to observe him more closely during his visits. He looked exhausted. Dark circles bruised the skin beneath his violet eyes. His movements were sluggish. The magic that hummed around him felt erratic, spiking and dipping like a feverish pulse. The theocracy was in turmoil. I could hear the bells tolling from the city below, funeral bells. A plague was sweeping through the lower districts, a magical blight that turned blood to dust. The resistance, my people, were blaming the temple. The temple was blaming the resistance. Valerius was carrying the weight of it all. One evening, he arrived late. He didn't bring food. He brought a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. He poured the wine with telekinesis, the red liquid swirling into the crystal goblets. He floated one to me and kept one hovering near his lips. "The council wants you executed," he said abruptly. I took the glass. "And what does the high priest want?" "I want." He trailed off, staring out the window at the fires burning in the distance. "I want silence. I want the screaming to stop." "The screaming?" He tapped his temple. "The prayers. The dying. The hatred. I hear it all, Kalen. It never stops. It is the price of my power." I sat on the edge of the bed. "Is that why you can't touch anyone?" Sensory overload. Valerius laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "If only it were that simple." He turned to face me. "My power. It is not generated. It is taken. I am a siphon. The goddess demands balance. To heal the land, I must absorb the corruption. To wield light, I must consume the darkness." He took a long drink of wine, the glass trembling in the air. "My skin," he continued softly, "is a gateway. Anything living that touches me, I drain it. Instantly. I don't mean to. It is passive. It is a curse. I killed my mother when I was born. I killed my first wet nurse. I killed a lover who tried to kiss me when I was 16. He looked at me, his eyes filled with an ancient, crushing loneliness. "I am death, Kalen, wrapped in silk and gold. That is why I was terrified. Not of you, but of what I would do to you." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. The distance, the gloves he wore in public, the isolation. He was starving for connection, yet condemned to eternal solitude. "So why keep me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why not just let the council kill me?" Valerius looked away, a flush rising on his pale neck. "Because, when you are near, the voices get quieter. I don't know why. Your presence. It acts as a shield. It is the only peace I have known in 20 years. He was using me as a dampener. A human sedative. It should have made me angry. I should have felt used. Instead, I felt a strange, twisting ache in my chest. "You're dying," I observed. It wasn't a question. The gray pallor of his skin, the tremors. The corruption. "You've absorbed too much." "The plague," he confirmed. "I have been drawing it into myself to spare the city. But the vessel is cracking, Kalen. I don't have much time left. There has to be a way to discharge it." "There isn't. Let me help you." He looked at me with tragic amusement. "How?" By holding my hand while I wither? You would turn to a husk in seconds. You don't know that, I insisted. I'm not like the others. You said it yourself. I quiet the voices. Maybe I can handle the touch. I will not risk it, he snapped, the command returning to his voice. You will stay here. You will survive. And when I am gone, in the chaos that follows, you will escape and lead your people. That is my final gift to you. He turned to leave. Valerius, I shouted. He paused at the door, but didn't look back. Goodbye, Kalen. The attack came 2 nights later. It wasn't the resistance. It was a coup. I was woken by the sound of shattering glass. The magical wards on my door dissolved with a hiss. 3 men in the crimson robes of the High Council burst in, daggers drawn. Kill the stray, the leader snarled. I didn't have a weapon, but I was a general. I grabbed the heavy brass candelabra from the bedside table and swung. The first man went down with a crushed skull. The second lunged, slicing my arm, but I kicked his knee backward, shattering the joint. I didn't stop to finish them. I ran. The palace was in chaos. Paladins were fighting each other. Smoke filled the corridors. I knew where I had to go. Not to the exit, but to the throne room. If the council was killing me, they were certainly killing Valerius. I fought my way down the spiraling stairs, stealing a sword from a fallen guard. My arm was bleeding, adrenaline masking the pain. When I reached the great double doors of the throne room, they were barred. I could hear the magic screaming from inside, a high-pitched whine that rattled my teeth. Open, I roared, slamming my shoulder against the wood. Inside, a voice boomed, Elder Malachir. Yield, abomination. The vessel is full. We will drain you and forge a new god. I found a gap in the masonry, a weakness from the battle, and wedged my sword in, prying with all my strength. The lock snapped. The scene inside was a nightmare. Valerius was suspended in the air in the center of the room, held by chains of red magical energy. 5 elders surrounded him, chanting. Black ichor, the physical manifestation of the corruption, was pouring out of Valerius's eyes and mouth, pooling on the floor. He was screaming, a sound that wasn't human. They were overloading him. They were forcing him to release all the absorbed plague at once to weaponize it, destroying him in the process. Valerius, I yelled. The distraction worked. One of the elders turned. I threw my sword. It took him in the throat. The chanting faltered. Valerius fell from the air, crashing onto the dais. The corruption swirled around him like a sentient shadow, lashing out. It turned the marble floor to sludge. Don't come closer. Valerius choked out, coughing up black blood. It's breaching. I can't hold it. The remaining elders realized the danger. If Valerius exploded, he would take the capital with him. They began to flee, shielding themselves. I didn't flee. I ran toward the dais. Kalen, no. Valerius screamed, scrambling backward, his robes stained with the tar-like substance. It will kill you. The corruption lashed out, a tendril of black smoke striking my chest. I braced for death. I waited for the draining, the withering. It didn't come. Instead, where the darkness touched me, it sizzled and turned to gold. A warm, vibrating heat spread through my ribs. I stopped, looking down at my chest. The corruption wasn't draining me. I was neutralizing it. Valerius stared, his eyes wide with disbelief. Impossible. You said I quiet the voices, I said, stepping onto the dais. The black sludge receded from my boots as if afraid. Maybe I'm not just a dampener, Valerius. Maybe I'm the ground wire. I reached him. He was shaking so hard his teeth chattered. The corruption was pouring off him in waves, suffocating him. Please, he wept, curling into a ball. Please go. I don't want to kill you. I love you too much to kill you. The confession hung there, amidst the smoke and blood. I dropped to my knees in the filth. You won't kill me. I didn't hesitate. I reached out and grabbed his face with both hands. Valerius screamed, a sound of pure terror. He tried to rip away, but I held him fast. The moment skin touched skin, the world exploded into white. It wasn't pain. It was a sensation of rushing water, of a dam breaking. I felt the cold, oily sickness inside him, the years of plague, the rot of the world he had absorbed. It rushed into me, a tidal wave of filth. But as it hit my core, my own soul flared up to meet it. My soul was a furnace. His was the fuel. The blackness channeled through my arms and burned. It turned into light, blinding, golden light that blasted outward from the dais, shattering the windows of the throne room. I saw memories that weren't mine. A lonely child locked in a tower. A boy wearing gloves to hide his hands. A man watching a rebel general from a distance, admiring his fire, wishing he could warm himself by it without extinguishing it. Kalen, he gasped against my lips. I kissed him. It was a kiss of desperation, of war, of salvation. The energy surged one last time, a massive pulse that cleared the room, cleared the palace, perhaps even cleared the sky above the city. The heavy weight of the corruption evaporated, burned away by the circuit we had completed. When the light faded, we were left kneeling in the center of a scorch mark that spanned the entire floor. Valerius was limp in my arms, but he was breathing. His skin was no longer gray, it was flushed with life. The black veins that had marred his neck were gone. He opened his eyes. The violet was clear, bright as amethysts. Slowly, hesitantly, he lifted a hand. He stared at his own fingers, then looked at me. He reached out and touched my cheek. He waited for me to die. I didn't. I leaned into his touch, covering his hand with mine. "You're warm," he whispered, tears spilling over. "You're so warm. And you're not cursed," I said, wiping a smudge of ash from his forehead. "You were just incomplete." The doors to the throne room burst open again. My soldiers, the resistance, had breached the palace. They stopped, weapons raised, staring at the tableau. Their general, holding the high priest, surrounded by the remnants of a divine explosion. Valerius stiffened, the old mask trying to slide back into place. "Your army," he murmured. "They will want my head." I stood up, pulling him with me. I didn't let go of his hand. I would never let go of his hand again. I turned to my lieutenant, who stood gaping in the doorway. "The council is dead," I announced, my voice echoing in the silent hall. "The high priest is under my protection." I looked at Valerius. He looked at me, fear warring with hope. "The war is over," I said to him, low enough that only he could hear. "But we have a lot of work to do. You have a lot to atone for." "I know," Valerius replied, his grip on my hand tightening until his knuckles were white. "I will spend the rest of my life making up for it. Starting with you." "Good," I smirked, pulling him flush against my chest, delighting in the way he gasped at the contact. Not from fear this time, but from the sheer, overwhelming novelty of touch. Because I intend to collect on that debt every single night. The weeks that followed were a blur of political upheaval. With the council gone and the high priest allied with the resistance, the civil war ended not with a bang, but with a treaty signed in the Sapphire Tower. Valerius stepped down as the autocrat of the theocracy, establishing a senate. He kept his title as high priest, but his role changed. He was no longer the sin eater. We discovered that as long as I was near him, touching him, anchoring him, he could channel the corruption into the earth, neutralizing it harmlessly. We were a battery, a binary star system, but the politics were boring compared to the knights. I lay in the massive bed of the Sapphire Tower, the silk sheets tangled around my legs. Valerius was asleep on my chest, his platinum hair spread out like a fan. Even in sleep, he held on to me, his fingers clutching my side. He woke with a start, a remnant of his old trauma. His eyes darted around, panic flaring until they landed on me. "I'm here," I soothed, running my hand down the smooth curve of his back. He relaxed instantly, melting into the touch. I thought, "I know." He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at me. The moonlight caught the sharp angle of his cheekbones. He looked younger now, the weight of the world lifted from his shoulders. "Do you know what the texts say about us?" he asked softly. "That we are abominations?" "No," he smiled, a genuine, rare expression that made my heart stutter. "They call it the eclipse bond. When the sun and the moon align, one cannot exist without the other. If they touch, they burn the world clean." "I like that," I said, reaching up to pull him down for a kiss. "Let's burn it all down then." Valerius laughed, and for the first time in his life, he didn't pull away. He sank into me, skin against skin, heart against heart, finally whole. And that is how the prisoner captured the priest, and the priest liberated the prisoner. If you enjoyed seeing Valerius finally surrender to the touch he craved, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you have the courage to touch someone if you knew it might kill you? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,